The history of humankind is about evolution. Everything has changed. Our clothes, food, technology, society in general. So it is normal that our language has also evolved. How does it happen? Stay on to find out, and I also have some recommendations for you. We are gonna discuss two main topics. The first one is the changes in language, past and current. The second topic is the attitudes toward some of these changes toward words, and also we will have the opportunity to reflect on our own attitudes. Before we take a look at the changes, bear in mind this thought. Language has no independent existence apart from the people who use it. It is not an end in itself. It is a means to an end of understanding who you are and what society is like. Our first change is pronunciation. Spelling allows us to see very clearly how it has changed over time because we don't write exactly as we speak. Changes in pronunciation are the result of many different processes. One of them is known as the Great Vowel Shift, which occurred from the 15th to the 18th centuries. The sound of the vowels evolved, but not the spelling. And that's why sometimes we struggle when we are writing in English. But don't feel bad. Other people have also found it a bit problematic. For example, Benjamin Franklin. In 1768, he wrote A Scheme for a New Alphabet and a Reformed Mode of Spelling. There, he proposed a fairly accurate phonetic system for spelling English. Some years later, he published his phonetic alphabet, which included new letters, but it didn't catch on. Jonathan Swift, the celebrated writer, tells us about another change in pronunciation. He wrote in 1765, "There is another set of men who have contributed much to the spoiling on the English tongue. I mean the poets from the time of Restoration. They introduced that barbarous custom of abbreviating words to fit them to the measure of their verses, and their taste in time became so depraved that what was at first a poetical license not to be justified, they made their choice to take up the same custom in prose." He was particularly talking about the regular verbs in past. People would say call it or dream it instead of called and dreamed, but because of poetry, the endings were abbreviated. Jonathan Swift didn't like that at all, but to us, now that's normal. He also wrote, "Another cause which has contributed not a little to the maiming of our language is a foolish opinion, advanced of late years, that we ought to spell exactly as we speak, which beside the obvious inconvenience of utterly destroying our etymology, would be a thing we should never see an end of." I'm so sorry, Benji. Here we can see two types of attitudes. Benjamin Franklin showed more acceptance to changes than Jonathan Swift, and this is related to two types of people, descriptivists and prescriptivists. Which team do you support? Not only does pronunciation change, but also the form of words. Let's take, for example, compound nouns. Probably this same question has kept you awake for hours. Let's find out why. How do you pronounce these words? When they first appeared, the stress used to be in the second word, Boy Scout, ice cream, X-ray. But as they became familiar, backshift occurred. This means that the stress is now on the first part of the word, Boy Scout, ice cream, X-ray. And not only that, as they started to represent a whole and unique concept, some compound words became linked by a hyphen or even merged into a single word. Ice cream, for example, is also found as ice cream with a hyphen. We can predict that in the future it might become a single word, as it has happened to supermarket, blackboard, and many others. The reason is that the longer a word has been in use, the more possibilities it has to become a single word. When you think of ice cream, you don't picture ice and cream separately, but as a single object. So it is natural that you think of it as a single word as well. Going back to the question about superheroes, the rule we just considered might not apply particularly to these names, but we can use them to help us remember. Batman was created in 1939. This is the one that has been in use for a longer time, so it is natural that it is only one word. The other two are more recent, but because of the backshift process, we could say that in the future, they might become one single word. Grammar changes as well. One case is grammaticalization. This is when lexical items become function words. Take can, for example. This word is from Old English kunan, which meant to know. In Shakespeare's time, the following sentence would be perfectly normal. My grandfather could Greek and Latin. Nowadays it sounds a bit strange. We think that a main verb is missing, but in those times could was the main verb, so it meant my grandfather knew Greek and Latin. There is a modern remnant of can as a lexical item in the word uncanny. We could use this in a sentence like, the wizard has uncanny powers. Uncanny means mysterious, and something is mysterious when it is unknown. We also use can to express ability more than knowledge, but if you know something, you have the ability to handle it. So the word went from knowing to indicating general ability as a modal verb. Another case is the ly ending for adverbs. This suffix comes from like, which in Old English meant body, but it was spelled lic. Nowadays we can say words like childlike, which literally means as in the body or form of a child. In the past it was pronounced leak, but little by little the sound k was dropped. Here we see again how a lexical item became a grammar word, in this case a suffix that doesn't have a meaning on its own. It has to be accompanied by another word in order to make sense. For example, slow, slowly. Slow is an adjective, and li turns it into an adverb. However, some words become other parts of the speech without any changes in form. This is known as conversion, and more specifically, when nouns are turned into verbs, this is called denominalization or verbing. Do you remember that Benjamin Franklin supported some changes? What would you say was his attitude towards denominalization? Well, in a letter to Noah Webster, he said that it was awkward and abominable. Now we Google things, we friend strangers and heart pictures. But some people, just like Benjamin Franklin, complain that this is destroying the language, but they water their plants without a problem. We have entered the vocabulary realm. It also happens that new words appear, whereas others get lost. How do new words enter the language? One way is by borrowing them. As lexicographer Corey Stamper says, English has been borrowing words from other languages since its infancy. Did you know that English has taken words from 350 languages? It is actually about 80% of English. And this brings us again to attitudes. Maybe you have heard someone say, don't use words that belong to other languages because this kills your mother tongue. Is this true? Well, just look at English. It has actually strengthened it. And also remember what David Crystal said, that language is a means to an end. As long as we are communicating, we are not necessarily destroying the language. Other ways to create words include coinage and blending. Coinage is when a person invents one word and it starts to be used. And blending is when you combine two words. And if you look at the examples, some of them even make it to dictionaries. As part of language evolution, some words disappear from our vocabulary. Have you seen these words before? Borborygmic refers to the noises that your stomach makes when you're hungry, or hangry, or horngry. There you have some other fine examples of blending. Computation. It comes from potare, the Latin word for drinking, and com means together. Computation means drinking with other people, and perpetuation means drinking a lot. If you want to know more about words that are no longer in use, I recommend the Horologicon by Mark Forsyth. It is a journey throughout the lost words of the English language. The name means the Book of Hours, and it is called this way because the words are arranged according to what time of the day you might need them. It's wonderful. Some words do not disappear, but their meaning changes. What words do you associate with these ones? Perhaps nice and cute, comfortable and relaxing, meat, flesh, animals? Did they always have the same meaning? Nice used to mean foolish in the 13th century. Comfortable would literally mean something that gives you strength. And meat used to mean food in the Old English period. In other cases, the meaning might not change, but the connotation could evolve. This means that the attitude toward a particular word might change from a positive into a negative one. For example, crippled. In the past, it was perfectly okay to use that word, but at some point it became offensive. Handicapped was a better option, but at some point it became offensive. Disabled was a much better option, but at some point it became offensive. And the same happened with differently abled and special needs, and when this term becomes offensive as well, we will have a new one. Are there current changes? It's difficult to notice language evolution as it happens, but it certainly does. Do you remember grammaticalization? It is happening to some words, for example, like. It has new uses. One would be factuality and counter-expectation. I went to a nightclub and there were like grandparents and aunts and uncles. It is counter-expectation because in such a place you would not expect to find such people. It can also have a soothing effect. If we say, this is the only way to do it, is a bit stronger than this is like the only way to do it. Also, it's a quotative marker. It means that we use the word to introduce what people said. For example, and she was like, I don't care, and I was like, why not? As also has a counter-expectational effect. For example, if I say, I go into my room and I see this big-ass cockroach. I'm not talking about a fat-bottom insect. What I mean is that this cockroach was bigger than what I think they usually are. Based off of. We would normally say based on, but this term is catching on. Some people like it, some people don't. Look at this real example I took from a website. Carol Nicky said, I will never accept this term. It just smacks of ignorance. And what about you? Do you use it? Do you like it? The S for the third person. In some songs it is not pronounced, but also many people do not pronounce it when they are talking. I think it is very likely that this will disappear completely in the future. I'm sure you have seen some changes in the pronoun system. Many individuals prefer to use they and them instead of he and she. And not only that, look at the yellow table. There is a bunch of new pronouns that are being used. Will they catch on? Who knows? What conclusions can we reach from all this information? One is that language change is inevitable. Whether we like it or not, it's bound to happen. That's why we should have a balanced attitude to change. We should be flexible. So instead of saying that something is right or wrong, we could call it appropriate or not to the place and time we're in. I believe that we are entitled to like or dislike certain features of the language we speak, but we shouldn't be that judgmental. The purpose of language is communication. So what matters is that we find the best way possible to communicate effectively. And people will achieve that goal in many different ways, even if we don't like them. Well, this is the end of our talk. But before we go, I want to share with you my primary source of information for this video. It's this book called Words on the Move by John McWhorter. Here you can find more examples of how language has changed and is changing nowadays. If you know any other changes, please share them with me on the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and share. Thank you for watching. See you next time.